Okay, up next we have Drew Wagner, our PE here at Monroe County, and Ellen Enslin will be talking about program updates, e-permitting, and permit amendments.
Okay, my section's really short here because we already touched on the 105E permitting, and then Drew's pretty much got the rest of the show. So like I talked about before, Chapter 105 general permit e-permitting is live and active. I would say that if you do anything within the general permit realm, start looking at the user guides, the recorded webinars, and give it a try, because this is the way all of the DEP permits seem to be going. And we highly encourage that you start submitting things electronically. The first thing the user guides will say is that you have to register in Greenport, which puts you as a DEP user. Within an engineering firm, you'd have to coordinate that how you would register in Greenport. Everybody has to be registered, and then there has to be an electronic filing administrator, registration, and then a security agreement for permitting. And the user guides actually have screenshots, and they'll walk you through each step of this. And the webinars are also helpful. We've learned in the last couple days that this step is becoming cumbersome, and some people are being denied. So I would say if you're having any issues with registering Greenport or submitting that EFA, getting that security agreement approved, any of that you contact the DEP central office through the email that's on the e-permitting website and give suggestions, let them know the problems that you're having, things that are holding you up on getting that done. But once you do get all of that done, you can start accessing the dashboard and start applying. This is what the dashboard does look like. This is a sample during the training, which you'll see. You'll be able to work on draft general permits. You don't have to submit it all at one time. You can upload PNDIs, you can upload ENS plans as you work on it, and then at the very end hit the submittal button, and that's when it gets submitted to the DEP office. It does get submitted to DEP and then gets funneled to the conservation district that's in charge of that project, that area. If there's no delegated conservation district, it will remain in the regional office. So what you'll see is all of the letters that would normally come back to your client and to the engineering firm, you'll see those being sent electronically. There will be no paper back and forth or any of that. It'll all be electronic, including the actual authorization. So contractors won't have paper copies on site unless those are provided. Everything will live on the e-permitting realm. So that's where we're at now. All of our inspections will be done from the electronic permits. All of the authorizations will be done that way too. So you can submit paper copies still, but it's not as encouraged to do the paper copies. We're really encouraging for you to give it a try and move forward with this e-permitting. Has anybody submitted through e-permitting yet? No? There has been some across the state, so. Any questions on 105 e-permitting? Sure.
When there's comments posted back, is there a notification, or is it on the user to constantly check in?
No, there's a notification sent back.
And then electronic payment, credit card, like online, or
the payment for the actual general permit fee can be done online. The conservation district erosion and sediment control fees still would have to be submitted for the ENS reviews. That's still being worked at. I know we're looking, at least in Pike County, on how we have to change our own internal systems, but we're kind of waiting to see how this shakes out a bit before that happens. Gene?
How do signatures work in that process?
Signatures?
Yeah.
I believe that, well, you're actually uploading something, so like the PNDI would have the PNDI signature on it, but I believe it's all electronic, the electronic signatures.
It's all in the agreements. When you have the agreements, it's laid out in those agreements.
This security agreement for permitting and the EFA, the client is also logging on as a user, so the client would be logged into Greenport, and they would then give you authorization to submit on their behalf. So it's a little bit more cumbersome on the front end to work out those agreements. I'm sorry, Jan.
You have to be up till there, and the client has to log on too.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're looking at maybe modifying some things, but I'm not sure if that's part of it.
The client doesn't have to be logged on while you're logged on.
Yeah.
You log in, they give you permission, and then you have carte blanche to do what you need to do within the system.
But they have to log on to the
They have to become a user in Greenport, and once a person or entity it becomes a DEP user, they're a DEP user. They're into Greenport.
Yeah, well, PennDOT allows the client to sign a paper, and then we stamp it.
That's similar to this, yeah. At that stage, at the second stage. Yeah, sorry about that, I wasn't clear. Anybody else? Sorry?
So then once the client is logged in, if you go back and do anything for them in the future, they don't need to sign anything in. They're there, do you automatically have their permission, or?
It depends on how it's,
Yeah.
it depends on how they set up the permissions in Greenport. So they may have multiple consultants working on the project, and they may want to restrict access for each consultant. So they have that ability to do that. And again, it all depends on how it's set up in Greenport.
Right. Yeah, like I said, you can see that big red changes may be coming to this step. This is an area where it's been recognized that there may be some improvements. And I would highly suggest if you go to the e-permitting website, there's an email on there. They're looking for suggestions right now. Now's your time to go in, try it out, see what you can do, and make suggestions. And they're open to them. We've made some suggestions, and I know other consultants have made suggestions, and there have been changes made. I will point out something I don't think mentioned today is on the Monroe website and on the Pike County website, we put together a resource page of all of the websites we've mentioned today. So you can go on there, and they're live links. You can just click from there if you have trouble finding anything we mentioned today. Any other 105E permitting questions? All right, Drew's going to talk about the future here, 102, and NPDS. The future.
All right, just wanted to start off by saying anything you hear today is probably going to change tomorrow. I'm being upfront, I'm being honest. Actually, I'm supposed to be in a meeting right now for the steering committee for e-permitting for 102, but I'm here, so I'm missing out on that one today. So, and that's okay, because there's a pretty good group of folks that are working on it across DEP and conservation districts. They tried to get a pretty good sample of different conservation districts across the state. Every territory has slightly different things going on. In Monroe we have a lot of high quality. Other towns, other areas, they may not. So they're trying to get a good group cross section of folks to figure this all out, and it's quite a daunting task. So where did we start? Well, it already exists for oil and gas program, so there's sort of a model and a template that exists, and that's what we're basing the majority of what you're going to see off of. Obviously, there's a lot of tweaks and a lot of changes just simply because the programs are slightly different. It is scheduled to be coming out in 2019. I've heard as soon as spring, and that kind of scares me a little bit because there's still a lot of work to be done with it. But we are certainly working diligently on it and trying to learn our lessons from the other e-permitting programs that are already in place. It's going to be a similar environment to what's out there already. There obviously with some changes to it. It's going to be a full function paperless process for most reviews. There's been some discussion on some of the larger linear projects. Maybe there would still be some plans, but the bulk of the other information would still come through electronically. That's still in discussion. I think I'm going to be having some much thicker glasses coming up here soon, trying to review a lot of these things on the computer, but we'll figure it out. I already talked about the steering committee, and the one thing that you need to know is that there's going to be training for this as they roll it out. They're not just going to roll it out and say, hey, good luck. They will have some training for it, and I would strongly suggest that when that training rolls out, you attend. So if there's any questions, I'll certainly entertain them. If I can answer them, I will. If not, we'll move on. Yes, Rocco.
Will this be like the other
That's a good question. So the question is, will it be all or nothing? And the answer we're getting right now from DEP is yes. Once this rolls out and goes live, those new projects that are going to be rolling in are going to have to use the system. That's the way it's being set up right now. Now, those that are already in the pipeline, from my understanding and discussions that have been had, are that those will be able to be finished out in the paper environment, and then new things rolling in will be strictly e-permitting. So I'm personally excited for it. I think it's gonna be a good thing. There's going to be some growing pains, but there's always growing pains, so it's something new. Yes.
So once this goes into place and the 102 permit gets issued, are we going to have to supply the contractors with stamped approved ENS drawings to have on site?
So the question is, how do we handle stamped plans for construction? And no, there will not be stamped plans that will be going out to construction. Everything will be held online, and you'll be able to plot those or print those out from those files that are online. Whether or not there's going to be some sort of a stamp or electronic, tag that's put onto them, that's still in discussion. But it would be purely electronic. Yes, sir.
Just for clarity, then the plan reviewers will be reviewing plans from their computer screens.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know from all the plan reviewers from the districts how confident you are that you're going to be able to do that.
If they have plotters.
They do have plotters.
No, we don't. We don't have plotters. I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident. We're making changes right now to accommodate it. We're looking at getting dual 32-inch monitors, potentially touchscreen monitors, to where we'd be able to mark up right on the monitors in Adobe. So I think it can be done.
To be clear, that's what Monroe County's getting.
And that's a practical problem or a practical question. Okay, that's a practical question. I think it's possible. I have friends in the industry who review plans elsewhere, and they have similar setups, and they're able to do it all electronically. I thought I saw no. Yes, sir.
For non-MPDS permits, if you have to submit an ENS review to the Conservation District, will that still go through the e-permitting system?
No. So the question was, will plans that are not NPDS permits have to be submitted electronically? So if it's just an ENS plan, that would still go through the district under the typical district policy. Yes?
We've been hearing for a couple of years that there's going to be a simplified small projects MPDES coming. Is that on the radar of the steering committee? Is that part of
No, it's not part of the e-permitting process.
Is that still in consideration, or is that?
Your guess is as good as mine what's going on at DEP. I know DEP has a lot of things that they're working on, a lot of things that are sort of in the works. We had on the agenda today to discuss the Common Plan of Development, but that, the original draft anyway, that guidance wasn't finalized in time for the presentation today, so we weren't able to really discuss it. Yeah, they've been working on it for a number of years. I don't know where it stands. They've got, how do we want to say, their priorities change hourly. So, so, any other questions? All right, go ahead, Annie. We're going to go ahead and roll right into amendments. All right, so permit amendments. What are they? Why do we need them? What are these amendments that we're talking about? What are these modifications we're talking about? Well, we'll talk about that as well. Amendment types, applicability criteria, how do you apply for these amendments, and common amendment examples. So we'll start off, what are they? Why do we need them? By a show of hands, who has designed and had built a project that didn't need a single change? That's what I thought. Wait a minute, I have a brave soul back there. Okay. So generally speaking, this never happens. You never get a chance to design and build a project without any changes once the permit's been issued. So what do the amendments do? What it does, it creates a flexibility within the system to allow changes after the permit's been issued. There are revisions to the plans or design or the implementation of ENS or PCSM controls after the permit's been issued. Most of the times amendments are needed to facilitate the completion of a project. When I sit in pre-construction meetings, oftentimes, one of the things that we discuss is, now that the contractor's had a chance to look at the plans, are there any changes? And more oftentimes than not, there are. And that's great, actually. It's really taking a look at what needs to be done to get the project finished. So, amendments versus modifications. What's the difference? There is none. Back in 2018, way back then, DEP transitioned to the word amendments because it keeps with other programs and also keeps with the verbiage that's in Chapter 92, I believe. So you'll hear me use those two words interchangeably throughout the day. I'm not doing that to try to confuse you or mess you up. It's just the nature of the beast and my habit. And since they mean the same thing, it's not really the end of the world. Looking at types. DEP considers, or DEP says there's two types. And just as a side note, everything in this presentation, not everything, but most of the things in this presentation are contained in an FAQ put out by DEP on modifications. So I would certainly invite each one of you to take a look at it, read it, and go through it and ask questions. So DEP says there's two types of modifications. You have a minor and a major. Now, you might be thinking, what about field changes? Because I get field changes all the time. Well, you're right, you do get a field change, but that's classified as a minor amendment. And then you have the major amendments, and there's an important piece to this that I think is overlooked frequently. So when you have a major amendment, part of the reason why it's a major amendment is because it needs to be re-advertised in the PA Bulletin to give folks a chance to comment on it again. So if you're changing the scope, you're changing a lot of the disturbance, things like that, the public has to have the ability to look at it and comment if they see fit. So that said, I can count on the hand how many times I've seen comments on projects. It doesn't happen very often, but it is the right of the public to have that ability. So field changes. Who here has gotten a field change on a project? Just about everybody. They're pretty common. They're also referred to as red lines, and you'll see why in just a little bit. They're really the most basic type of amendment, and you can amend an ENS or a PCSM plan with a red line plan amendment. It does not increase earth disturbance. It does not have an effect on the approved approach to stormwater management, so you can't just have a red line and now, I don't know, possibly be discharging a higher rate or volume. It can be approved by DEP or Conservation District without the submission of an application or an NOI to amend the permit. Yes, Greg?
So you say does not increase earth disturbance. Does that mean the same as does not change limits to it?
Correct.
What if it changes the limits but not the area?
I'm going to address that in a little bit. Stay tuned. So the approvals generally occur in the field with revision to the plans done in handwriting. and initialed by the permittee and the inspector. There are some variations. Sometimes the plans are, they're too messy. You really can't get what you want to convey across just by using a red pen on a plan. So sometimes we'll get a phone call. Sometimes we'll get an email with examples of or revised plans. And we'll certainly take a look at those. A lot of times in Monroe, we'll get those revised plans via email. We'll look at them, we'll review them, and then we'll send an email saying, hey, these are good, fix them to your plans in the field, and we'll double check when we get out there next time we're doing the inspection. They're always, whenever a field change is authorized, it's always followed up in the inspection report, and we write those every single time we come out. Regardless of if the site's squeaky clean and there's no issues, we'll say that in our inspection report. But every time we come out, there will be an inspection report that's done. And this is a big one. You'll see this as a common theme as we go through every type of amendment. All the changes need to be included on an as-built record plan where appropriate. Now, to talk about your question about whether or not you can swap areas is basically what you're saying. It's not a swapping of area. You have your limit of disturbance, which is a number that's tied to a plan. That number is tied to that plan, so you can't just be swapping areas out. That may have been allowed in the past, but under the new guidance that's been put forth, you can't swap out areas. It's a straight, no limit of disturbance increase for field changes. Sort of the process here, and each district may be a little bit different, but generally speaking, Conservation District can give changes to the PCSM plan regardless of delegation. So whether they have an engineer on staff, if they feel comfortable and confident in making those revisions, they can. Co-permittees can request field changes without the permission of the permittee. That's a big one. So your contractor in the field, since they're a co-permittee and considered an operator and have functional control over those BMPs, can ask for a change. Now, we'll authorize that change. If it's implemented without the owner's knowledge, they may not be reimbursed for a change. That's between the permittee and co-permittees. That's not something that we get involved with. And this is a big one. Work should not be completed until the field change is approved. Oftentimes, field changes are made, and well, now we need to look at it with kind of a different lens, and it's probably not going to be a field change. It would probably be a minor mod at that point, because we didn't get a chance to look at it ahead of time, and it's something that we're probably going to need to look at in a little bit more depth. So make sure you get those approvals before you do the field change. And the time to do that is as soon as you know you're going to need a change. Most projects, larger projects, smaller projects, have some sort of coordination meetings, weekly or otherwise. And those are the times where you need to identify where those changes are going to happen and get them to us as soon as you know so that we can react. We're pretty quick, but I know that things happen in the field very quickly at times. So further notice we have, the better off you are, and the less likelihood that there's going to be anything slowing up in the field. So here are some examples of field changes, and we'll kind of talk about these as we go through. And I'm happy people are asking questions as we go through. That's a nice format. So here we go. We have a super silt fence baffle, and they want to switch it over to a plywood baffle. Pretty simple change. I see this happen a lot where you have super silt fence baffles in the field, and it's a sediment basin that's going to be installed for multiple seasons. And anybody who knows the weather up here, the super silt fence baffles are good for about one winter. And then after that, they're toast. And they got to go back in, fix everything, reinstall them, refix them. So a lot of times, a contractor will realize that and say, hey, I don't want to have to get waders on and go out and fix this thing in the middle of the winter. So they'll ask if they can, switch it up to a plywood type of a baffle, and that's no problem, because we would rather not have to write that in on an inspection report either, quite honestly. So here's another example. Contractor comes back and says, hey, you know, this topsoil stockpile is right where I need to do the first stage of work. And we look at it and say, yep, you're right. And he says it would just be a lot better if we could shift it over here, still on the project, still within the boundary. Can we do that? Absolutely. We would rather you only have to move that pile once or that material once and put it in a spot where after that you don't have to touch it anymore until you need it for redistribution to the site. Here's another one, and I'm sure this never happens. You get your PennDOT permit after the NPDES permit. And now a whole bunch of things have shifted, and PennDOT wants you to shift your rock construction entrance over to be more in line with the driveway across the street, or for whatever reason, they say we want it moved. So that would be a good example of minor modification, or not minor, field change. This happens a lot. We actually just had this on a project. So they want to move the basin excavation ahead in the sequence to create fill for the rest of the site. That happens a lot of times. Whether it's because it was written, the sequence was written in a different frame of mind, or whatever, but they need fill. And rather than importing it in and trucking it in, the contractor wisely would like to get it from the site. So shifting, a simple shift, moving the basin ahead to produce fill for the site, as long as the E&S BMPs are in place for that disturbance. No problem with doing that at all. And also making sure that the outlet and everything is installed at the same time. Another change that we see a lot of times is, when some of these sequences are written, they think, it's going to happen during summer, everything's going to be great, and then here you are at pre-con in the middle of February with, 12 inches of snow on the ground. And, it's really not a good time to be doing site work, trying to get compaction and things like that, but there happens to be, I don't know, a month work of rock work that has to happen. So what happens sometimes is they'll ask, can we put the rock excavation now? And then, once the weather cooperates, we'll go back and we'll start doing our site work. Absolutely. As long as the E&S controls are in place, you have your rock construction entrances in, you have your silt sock or silt fence in, that's certainly something that can be accommodated as a red line. Oh, here we are, the friendly snowman, also known as an outlet control structure. So a lot of times, we'll get questions on this. Can I shift? Can I shift it over here? Can I shift the out orifice over here? Can I, move it this way a little bit, move it that way a little bit? And as long as you're not changing the inverts or the size, generally you can shift it around the outlet control structure without having any significant impacts on your routings. So shifting, for instance, you have the plate, shifting that over, as long as there's a hole behind it, you can certainly shift that plate over. Without the hole, it kind of would be, a moot point. Or, they may have a larger diameter discharge pipe that wasn't considered, and you might need to change the box from a standard box to a type 4 that's expanded to accommodate the discharge pipe. Things like that would all be considered field changes in red lines. So are there any questions on field changes? Okay, seeing none. It looks like they're starting to set up for the afternoon snack. So how about we do this? We'll take all right, so it's 2 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and come back at quarter after, and we'll pick up from there and finish out.